In acting, the odds are stacked against you, and ability and hard work is no guarantee of success. Unfortunately, it is not. However, consistency and tenacity will greatly, massively increase your chances of success.
Today we're here with Roger Clark, an Irish-American actor and voice actor. He is best known for the character of Arthur Morgan in the 2018 video game Red Dead Redemption 2. Most of his resume lies in theater, voiceover, television, and motion capture. He has performed in a total of 45 countries and now lives and works in New York. How are you today, Roger?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you kick things off with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course I can. So it's a very excellent introduction. Yes, my name's Roger. I was born in New Jersey, to an Irish mother and Irish American father. And then we moved to Ireland when I was about your age, around 12 years old. I had spent a lot of time there beforehand, but we didn't move over there permanently until I was about 12. And I finished off my what you would call elementary education there, high school, and then I went to university in South Wales in the United Kingdom, a place called University of Glamorgan. And I took a BA in theater, media, and drama out of there. And I was able to get honors and started my acting career out of the UK, and eventually migrated to London because that's where most of the work was and still is if you're an actor in the UK. So I started working out of there, predominantly theater, fair bit of voiceover too, as you pointed out. I was pretty good at voiceover to start with because having been born in the States and growing up in Ireland and then the UK, I had lived in quite a different lot of different regions. Well, I was able to get accents, at least English speaking ones, down pretty well. So I was able to do those to a fairly decent standard, and that's what got me hired for quite a bit. But I'm very grateful for the fact that I started out on theater because I went on to do video games and film, and I love all mediums, to be honest with you. But my favorite, I think, has to be theater. And the reason why is because your audience, your target audience, is right smack bang there in front of you. And their feedback is immediate. And there's no filters, but there's no filter of it. You get it in its purest form. They either laugh or they don't. They either clap or they don't. And being able to listen to them as much as they were listening to me really taught me how to improve as an actor. It really taught me how to respond in real time, and to learn what placates the audience, what they want, what they need. And it really helps the theater too, because when you have the same script every night and you learn the little nuances, you learn little timing, uh, little tiny synapses that you can enter in and for maximum effect. And I'm just really grateful that I was able to do it on stage. Not only on stage, but we toured quite a bit. We did a lot of Shakespeare all around Europe, Asia, etc. And the fact that we were able to take the same shows and the same scripts and play them to different cultures and different audiences was hugely informative. Like one example, we were doing a stage adaptation of Frankenstein all around France for about 2 months. And we had gotten quite used to the French audiences. We knew the bits that they liked and the bits that they didn't like, etc. And that was our first night back in Germany where we started the tour. And I think we were in a town called Koblenz or something. And we really bombed that night. And we were like, what's going on? We've been killing with the show for the past 2 months until we realized, oh, we're back in Germany now. It's a different type of audience. It's a different sensibility. And we forgot to listen to the audience. You forgot to listen to the consumer, which I think is one of the most key parts of success too, is you got to know what your audience wants and you got to be able to give it to them. So yeah, that's to answer your question. I started out in the UK professionally, and that's where I started out with video games as well. And I got to learn performance capture, which is a fascinating medium for me, which is how most video games are done these days. And we're going to see it a lot more in film too, especially next month. We've got Avatar 2 coming out. That's the same type of technology that I did with a lot of my video games. And then I moved back to the States in 08. 2008, we moved back to New York City. And I've been working here ever since. And nowadays, it's mostly voiceover, especially since COVID, but I couldn't, my arms are black and blue because I keep pinching myself. I'm very, very fortunate, very lucky. And I think, well, I'll be getting to that later, but gratitude, I think, is one of the most important parts of not only keeping your success, but appreciating it. Because if you don't appreciate it, then what's the point,
Wait, what was your biggest challenge with your acting career?
Wow, my biggest challenge with my acting career. Okay, that's easy. For an actor, I would say it's rejection. You know, uh, one of the things about being an actor is your success is often dependent on other people's decisions, and your success is very rarely, or at least not all of the time, it's very little in your control. You can give the best audition you can get and still not get the job because you're 5 years too young, or you're 2 inches too tall, or it's something that has absolutely nothing to do with your control. That's usually what whether or not you book the part is very seldom something that is actually to do with you. And so one of the most difficult parts for me was being out of work for sustainable periods of time, which often did happen at the beginning of my career, and one of the things that was particularly difficult about that is, I would have to pursue survival jobs to keep my head above water, and it was very difficult to find the energy then to still pursue my passions. Um, so so that was particularly a challenge. And for sustained amounts of time, it does take quite a bashing to your confidence, and you do often second guess yourself. So we'll be getting to the three principles later on, but that's why tenacity is another one of those things that I was going to mention later on. But definitely the most difficult part of my career has been going through those long periods of unemployment where I didn't know where my next job was going to come from. And, it's very often feast or famine, like a lot of people say. And tenacity is so important in those situations.
Uh, how would you get your way like over rejection? Like if you got rejected with like an act that you really wanted to get into, like if you wanted to get your audition in, you didn't get accepted, what would you do?
So, yeah, great question. So one of the ways to help is, and it's really hard to do, but it's the best advice if you can manage to do it, is as soon as you've done it, forget about it. I think the same could apply to job interviews too. Unless you've agreed to follow up with another meeting, I think as soon as you've done a job interview, one of the healthiest things you could do is just forget about it and empty it of your mind for a few moments at least. And give yourself some space before you go back and analyze it and ask yourself, well, what is it about that I could have done better? I think once it's done, I think give yourself a break from it, because if you're anything like me, anyways, you're probably been obsessing over it for the previous 12 or 24 hours anyway. So give yourself a break once that interview or audition is done. Try and dispel it from your mind, at least temporarily, and give yourself some peace, some well-earned peace, because you've probably worked very hard for that preparation-wise. Another thing that I do is to not take it personally, especially when it's personal. I think a lot of business practitioners should follow that rule. Very rarely is anything personal, and even in the few instances when they are, those I believe are the most important times not to take something personally. This is our jobs. This is a profession. This is business. Nothing can be personal. So it's easy not to be personally affronted if things don't go your way, because things are not going to go your way most of the time. And if we can find a way not to let that emotionally affect us, then we will be able to learn from it in a better, more efficient way, in my opinion. So that's how I deal with it.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Like,
Sure. Well, another way. Let's go about how I prepare for an audition or a job interview. Often a lot of actors can't stand auditions, and I totally understand where they're coming from with that, because it's a very even more so than a job interview. It's a very unnatural place to perform in. You're walking into a room, probably standing on the other side of a table, to three, four, five people, some of whom you may know, most of whom you probably don't. And you are trying to affect a performance that you think they want. Uh, and That in itself, there's a whole minefield of problems that involves. But we haven't found a better way to do it. So oftentimes people, especially actors, very apprehensive in preparation for an audition. They'll often second guess themselves. They'll think of doing it one way, and then they'll show up in the waiting room, and then they'll hear someone rehearsing the same lines as them a few feet apart, and it could totally throw what they've prepared for the day. So that sometimes would affect me too. But one of the ways I was able to get by that is to look at it in a different way, and I think you can apply this to job interviews too. This is an opportunity for someone who has never seen your work to see your work, or to better understand you, and the way that you approach your work. So it's actually, and you should walk into it with the mindset that you're probably not going to get it. I mean, if you look upon any job interview or audition in a purely mathematical sense, you're probably not going to get it. And if you acknowledge that definite possibility, well, then, you don't have to worry as much, and then you can actually start to enjoy it and see it as the opportunity that it really is. And even if you don't get the job, you will definitely have had the opportunity to make an impression on some decision makers that might be hiring 2, 3, 4 years down the line, and they might not forget you. This happens so often in the acting industry, where you'll come in and you totally won't get the part, but there's something about you that they liked, and you said, you know what, will you read for this guy instead? And then they end up booking that. That happens a lot. So you should always look upon it as an opportunity,
can you tell me your top three principles to success?
Okay, yes. So I had a thought about this. So I mentioned two of these before. So the first one is tenacity. Don't give up, because often an actor has to approach the audition process much in the same way as someone in sales needs to approach their job. Every no brings you closer to your next yes, and every opportunity you have to pitch is an opportunity to learn and to improve for the next time. And I definitely believe that, especially in an atmosphere where you're probably lucky if you book less than 5% of the stuff that you get up for. Tenacity is an absolute necessity. Otherwise, you'll give up. You'll give up because the odds are not in your favor. And unlike entrepreneurial, and in many entrepreneurial atmospheres too, but in acting, the odds are stacked against you, and ability and hard work is no guarantee of success. Unfortunately, it is not. However, consistency and tenacity will greatly, massively increase your chances of success. Because if you're prepared to fail every day, eventually you're not going to. I mean, it's almost like you can't help but not fail eventually. Even a cow banging its head against a wall, it might take it a while, but it will eventually start to think, well, maybe there's another way around this wall, and I can hold my hand up and say that I'm that cow too. And you give me enough failures, I will start to find a way to approach it from a different direction, and that will often help. So I think tenacity, especially consistency over the long term, is vital. Even whatever your passion project is, whatever your aspirations and dreams are, I think that you should do something, one thing every day, even if it's just an email. Do one thing every day to pursue that goal. And if it's you do that over 5, 6 years, you've done a fair bit of work, even if it's just an email, like I say. My principle is, well, I've called it eyes wide open, nothing is personal. And I was kind of talking about this earlier. So don't take anything personally. If you can take it on the chin and not emotionally react, then you will probably be able to learn from it in a more clear way. And you also have to understand that business is business. And oftentimes emotion has nothing to do with whoever you feel slighted by or whatever opportunity that you think you may have missed out on unfairly. The person's decision was probably not emotionally involved at all. And in the instances when it was, well, that's even more important not to take it personally, because you've got to ask yourself, well, what is it about me that these people are so against? But anyway, I think eyes wide open. You have to approach every business decision, every career decision with your eyes wide open. Don't, so many actors can often fool themselves, and we either overestimate or underestimate what we have to offer. So I think it's so important for actors to understand and know their product being themselves. You have to have a rational, objective view of what your product as an actor is. Like me, I'm a middle-aged white guy now. I would love to think I could still play 30-year-old parts, but no, I can't, So I got to objectively know what it is that what are the jobs that I can go up for, where I will be where I have the best, most successful chance of booking those roles. So I think eyes wide open, approach your passion project objectively, and that also gives you another opportunity to learn in the best way. And then my final principle is gratitude. I think gratitude is very important, if not to achieve your success, then definitely to enjoy and appreciate it if and when you get it. Like I've many people have told me, you never know who you're going to meet on the way up, but you very well probably will meet them again on the way down. So make sure you treat them kindly and with respect. Everyone. I think that's a very important part too. Like I said earlier, I've been a professional actor for over 20 years now, and I'd say the first 10 years of my career were pretty difficult. I wasn't making a lot of money, and then when after Red Dead Redemption, things started to change. And I'm grateful for those earlier periods, because it really made me appreciate what I've attained to. Because, and goes on, I'm skipping ahead again too, but success is relative, and this is something that I wish I knew when I was younger. Success is relative, because what I would have flipped out about 15 years ago, now I would consider that more of a normal thing, So. One man's success is another man's failure, and I think it's important to appreciate that perception, and that perception may change as we do. So those are my three principles that I was able to come up with.
So your three principles are tenacity, eyes wide open, nothing is personal, and gratitude.
You got it. That's it. Yeah.
Did you have any struggles with any of those top three principles you have?
Sure, absolutely. There were many times where I failed in tenacity and wanted to give up. And I never wanted. Actually, no, I take that back. I never wanted to give up. But there was a couple of times where I thought, you know what, I probably should, because nothing's happening. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't now. Also, with sometimes when I often remind myself how easy my job is at a great deal of the time. The hardest part about it is when you're not working. When you're working, I think it's the best job in the world. But even when I'm in the middle of a job, sometimes if we're doing a 14-hour day and we're doing the same thing over and over again, sometimes I have to remind myself to be grateful. But I always do, usually. And then nothing is personal. Yeah, there were plenty of times when I didn't get the role, and it shattered me. It absolutely broke me. And to to the point where I almost couldn't even drag up the motivation to prepare for the next audition. And that's when I knew it was a big, big, big problem. I remember the first time I had children too, when my oldest when my wife was pregnant with Colin. I was terrified because I still wasn't super, super successful just yet. And I did not know how this huge, massive lifestyle change was going to affect my ability to be able to prepare for work, as well as doing the survival jobs that I was probably going to have to increase now. So I was very scared. Yeah, I was very scared.
How did you stop yourself from giving up when you felt like giving up? Like,
To
how
be
did you get?
totally honest with you, I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what else I could be as successful at. So, I mean, I was bartending a lot. I could bartend, but I didn't find it aesthetically fulfilling. So I think, what often I was taught at a very young age that life is precious, and we only have one. And when we listen to elderly people on their deathbeds, they usually regret things that they haven't done more than things that they have. So I would always try and remember that. I've only got one shot at this. So you have to make sure that you give it your all, because so many people I see would enter the profession with the mindset of having a plan B if things don't go the way they plan. And 99% of the time, if you have a plan B, then you're on plan B. The only ones I noticed that didn't give up or that did eventually make it were the ones that completely committed to it and did not devote time and energy to a plan B.
What was your favorite movie that you like acted in, like as a gamer in those movies?
Oh, well, I guess I have to say Red Dead Redemption 2, because that was a massive contract. 5 years it took for my contribution to that project took. I started in August of 2013, and my last day, and almost to the day 5 years later, we finished in August of 2018. And I learned so much on that job. And for a 5-year contract was something that I had never dreamed of. Very unlikely I'll ever enjoy that again. So for the first time in my life, I had job security. I got job security with a very successful video game studio that had a really talented, intelligent team that I got to work with every day. It was a pure, pure blessing. Definitely Red Dead. That's my. I don't know if I'll ever top it either, and I'm totally happy with that. As long as I get to keep being challenged with new, exciting work, I'm happy. But if I don't know what'll top Arthur Morgan. Who knows? Watch this space.
What were your biggest challenges you faced with Red Dead Redemption 2? Like, did you ever like have any struggles with doing anything?
I always joke about this. I remember crouch running was very difficult, but that was just a physical toll, really. But to answer your question more seriously, it was the first time that I had ever worked extensively with computer animators. Usually, as an actor, you work with a director and a film crew or a theater crew. But Red Dead Redemption 2 was the first time I was working extensively with computer animators, and often it was the exact same situation for them. It was the first time that they were working with actors. So getting to understand each other's jobs and anticipating what they need, that was at first, before we were able to do that, there was a lot of communication problems. But then as we worked together over the years, we got to become quite a closely knit team, very well oiled. But at the beginning, it was a bit of a challenge. The two completely different fields, trying to, and we both had the same goals. There wasn't any real friction to speak of, but oftentimes there was a little bit of frustration, and it was usually down to poor communication because we didn't really understand each other.
Going back to principles, can you turn your principles into how-tos?
Well, I often ask myself, what's in my control? I apply a bit of stoicism to it. So if ever I meet an obstacle in my, or if ever I don't achieve something that I wanted to, I always ask myself, what's in my control? What can I change? And I focus on that. And then the things that almost just as importantly, I also acknowledge the things that I can't control and just put them in the back shelf of my head and prioritize the things that are actually within my power. Well, you didn't book the job because they said you needed to put on 5 more pounds. I said, well, that's no problem. I can totally do that. And yeah, well, you didn't book the job because it's now a woman. Okay, fair enough. There's nothing I can do about that. So, how to, as I often ask myself, what's within my control? What can I do? What can I do to learn from this?
Do you have any examples?
Absolutely, sure. A lot of the times, well, with theater, theater, if you don't book a job, you ask for feedback. Sometimes you'll get it back. And sometimes at the beginning of my career, I would always ask for feedback. What happened? Why didn't he book it? And the answer resoundingly was always something that I couldn't do anything about. So I would say after about 5 or 6 years of this, I stopped asking. And lately I've started to learn more and more. When an audition comes to an actor, it's usually sent to the casting director first. The casting director has a big old chat with the producer and the director, like, what does this role need? What kind of person you're looking for? Get a better understanding of it. And then once the casting director has that, they send it on to all the agents that they know of and trust. And then the agents look amongst their rota and their client list and the casting breakdown, which is a brief synopsis of what the character needs to be. And they see who in their clients match that, and then they put them up for the audition. So by the time I get the audition, it's been through a director, a producer, a casting director, and my agent. And so I read the breakdown. It'll ask for whatever, a gruff warrior or a surly old man or whatever. And I've learned over the years to pay less and less attention to what those breakdowns say, because those breakdowns are mostly for the benefit of the casting director and agent, just so they know who they should put up for the role. But once it gets into my hands, the biggest clues that I can take is from the script itself, from the actual pages. Because if I pay too much attention to the breakdown, well, then I'm going to come up with a very similar performance to every other person who got the same breakdown. And what these casting directors are really looking for is your own personal, unique stamp on whatever roles come your way. They want to see something that makes you stand out from the rest, something about your humanity which just leaps off of the page and into the audience. So I've started to learn that what's the unique stuff that I have to offer, as opposed to I think less about the competition and more about my own approach.
What's one thing you wished you've known when you started your acting career?
Success is relative. Like I said earlier, I wish I had known that, because I wish I had known that for later on, because it would have made me appreciate the earlier part of my career more as it was happening, instead of looking back in the past. Yeah, I think the fact that success is relative. But yeah, that's a short answer.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to the next generation of leaders?
Okay. So well, actually, there's one other thing that I want to bring up, and that is mistakes are mistakes are the best teachers. And what I'm grateful for, and what I was lucky enough to learn early on in my career, because of the amazing directors and mentors that I had, is they often taught me that the rehearsal process, or any space where an artist is preparing for their work or trying to create something, they have to afford themselves the freedom to fail. Because if you're so scared of failure, it can often be paralyzing, and then you don't come up with anything. You have to be prepared to fail, and if you do fail, you have to be prepared to learn from it objectively, like I was saying earlier. And that often is what's going to yield the best results and the best education. Failure is a great teacher, and you shouldn't be afraid of it as much as we often are sometimes. Don't be afraid of failure. But the best advice that I would give to the next generation of leaders, well, this is something that I think is pretty apropos for this generation in particular. We all went through COVID. That was almost 2 years of Zoom, and we did it. We did it. But I think what the upcoming generation needs to appreciate, and something that they haven't had the opportunity to learn that much, is that face-to-face communication is key. Face-to-face communication is so important and so valuable, so much more valuable even than what we're doing now. Sitting down with your colleagues and all of the people that you work with, and share your entrepreneurial experience with the people that you are going to have to trust and work with and share success with. It is so key that you sit down and face to face with them whenever you get the opportunity, whenever you're discussing whatever strategies that you're discussing. I think face to face communication is vital, absolutely vital. And I think it's the best way that you can get your message across, and it's the best way to know that someone's valued too. If you create the time to do that, to have the face to face, I think that's the most effective way to communicate. It's the most effective way to work when you can. Another bit of advice that I would say is give people the benefit of the doubt until you absolutely can't anymore. But don't be taken for either. Oftentimes, something would happen, and I would be so quick to judge, and so often, my first assumption of what had happened was not the case. And I know, and when I've been on the other side of it too, that if I didn't get chewed out, or if I didn't get screamed at for something that wasn't my fault, I found myself being much more appreciative to that person as well. So give people the benefit of the doubt until you absolutely can't do it any longer. And have a well-communicated team, and also know that I always find that a fulfilled team is always going to produce the best results. I didn't say a happy team. Sometimes that is not possible in a business environment, in a professional environment. Sometimes being happy just ain't possible, but you can always be fulfilled. That is possible. And a fulfilled team will always be productive. If you're working 12 hours a day, sometimes 18, day in and day out, no, you're not going to be happy. But if you believe in what you're working towards, that is key. And let your team know that they're valued too. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't. Let your team know that you appreciate them and they're valued. And that's the advice that I would give.
What's the best mistake you've ever made?
Well, I think I'll go back to my earlier thing. The best mistake I ever made was learning that I learned that I could make mistakes. The best mistake I never made was being afraid to make mistakes. But I was thinking about this, and I couldn't come up with something that I thought was the end of the world. And that, in my personal life, sure, but professionally, the best mistake I've ever made, I don't know. I always tried to avoid them. But oftentimes in rehearsal, You know, I would totally screw something up. But then artistically, that would open up a whole different avenue of creativity, something that we had never imagined before. And then that's what often leads to something really interesting, something unique, something you don't expect, you don't anticipate. I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but that often happens in rehearsal if you have a great rehearsal space, if you have a great rehearsal atmosphere, which is something that's usually determined and controlled by the director. If he or she creates environment, one where you're not scared to screw up, then you often create some pretty interesting things.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast, Roger. Is there any like social media that people could follow you on?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. That's rclark98. I'm on Instagram too. That's Rolling Raj. And I got a TikTok too now, a Roger Clark actor. And I usually just, whenever I attend a convention or any upcoming projects, that's what I usually put it on there. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.